Welcome everyone, this is Jacqueline Jax and I'm here with the beautiful Serenade of the season. This one is a watercolor palette that recently was sent to all of my subscribers for the September Serenade. This watercolor palette is all handmade, as are the other two that came in the kit. And if you received them, then you already know we are going to have a lot of fun painting these. I can't wait to dive into this one. I have so many ideas for things that we can paint. And even though they're a limited palette, you would be surprised how many things you can accomplish with just 4 really well-chosen paints. So, September Serenade, you know we're into fall leaves already. We know we've got birch trees. We know we have all kinds of things that we can paint here. And let's jump in and take a look at what's in store. Now, in every kit, I also send you watercolor paper. Some of it is scratch paper, but it's a very good high quality scratch paper. The other is 100% cotton, Jax cotton paper. It's very affordable. If you want to get it on the website, it's at jaxwatercolor.com. But it does come in the kit, and you can use both sides of each of the papers. So you should have plenty of starting watercolor paper just to get you going and come out with some really, really fun things to paint. But there's so much paint here in these watercolors that you definitely will be able to keep practicing these until you get them really, really right. So in this kit with the September Serenade watercolor palette, we have a beautiful primrose. We have a golden pawn, a fresh grass, and a birch black. These can be mixed together. The watercolor is highly pigmented and handmade in small batches. What that means is there are no fillers or chemicals or things that in them that make them muddy. So, with that being said, you can actually use the birch black with the golden pond. You can use it with the primrose or the fresh grass just to add a little mood to your painting. And you don't have to worry about it getting muddy, especially with the golden pond. The golden pond is much like a cadmium, as it's got a lot of body and a lot of brilliance, but it doesn't have anything in there that will make the mixes muddy like they do with cadmiums. I don't particularly like to paint with cadmiums, that's why I don't make them. And that's just because they really muddy a mix. And I think it's an old school color from a long time ago, but it's not something that's really in my palette at any given time because I just don't enjoy painting with it. I really like very highly pigmented light fast colors. So in all of the Jax watercolor lines, you're always going to get that, you know. This is that brilliant, it's a hot pink and it's light fast too. As opposed to Opera Rose, Primrose has a quinacridone staining power and it is such a gorgeous pink. It is one of the most brilliant ones. You can mix it with Golden Pond to get these really bright oranges that you see out here in fall. You can also mix it with your blues. You can mix it with birch black and get more of a purpley shade. It is just such a fun color, and it's such a clear color. As is Golden Pond, you're going to get that warmth, that kind of leaning towards the orange already. But if you mix it with the primrose, you're going to get all of those shades in between, from a very, very beautiful bright yellow with that gold tone to the primrose, and all those lovely shades just mixing on your paper. You see where we're going, right? It's definitely fall. Then of course you have the fresh grass, which gives you that greenery in your landscapes and in your florals. So depending on if you're in the mood to do botanicals or you're going to be painting pumpkin patches or whatever, there's a lot of things you can do with this particular palette. Now don't forget, we still have the October palette to open next, and that's going to be a lot of pumpkin. So you might just want to stick with all of these landscapes and really focus with this palette on the September, because I think that there's plenty that you can learn, and you can really do these colorful trees over and over and over again until you get the mixes right and you get a real feel for texture and how to get that, bring that out in the watercolor. As you can see, if we mix the fresh grass with a little bit of Golden Pond, it makes a very, very nice, like kind of a a first turn very bright green, and that's going to be good for showing light on things. So if you were to use the fresh grass with the birch black, that's going to give you the shadow of the grass. And if you use the fresh grass in its true form, it's going to give you a very, very bright green. But if you mix it with a little golden pond, it's going to give you a lighter green, which might be good if you're trying to reflect light. So when you go from golden pond to a mix of a little fresh grass, and then you go with a little bit of birch black in there, you're going to see it go from light to dark. And that's kind of what we see when we're just getting that golden sun. Less daylight hours are coming, and we get that really beautiful warmth kind of sunlight this time of year. And that's what this palette is meant to portray. So taking the kit, this is watercolor paper that I'm sampling on. I'm just going to start kind of getting some ideas on paper for how I might want to paint through. And I did a little photocopy of a drawing here for you of some birch trees so that you could just play. It doesn't give you a big drawing, but you could use this template to just kind of by eye copy this onto your watercolor paper, or you can practice it right here. But either way, I highly recommend you do several of them until you kind of like see what works for you. On this one, I'm actually starting with the lights and mixing that right in with just a touch of the darks. And then I'm going to start adding some color as I go through just to see what happens. This is a way that you can practice the mixes, practice different brushes, like we're doing this one with an angular shader, and we're going to do the next one with a little bit different brush. So you can see the difference in brushes and how you lay the paint down. It's also good to attempt a couple of different things. One, staying outside the lines of the birch trees so that you're painting the background first, but then still leaving enough light so that it doesn't look like just a solid piece of watercolor. And you can really leave light two different ways, right? You can leave it as the white of the paper, or you can leave it as a very light shade of color, knowing that you're going to come back in and you can add the contrast, which is either a darker color or a darker version of that color. The birch black is a great way to add some shadows. So if you do it gently in a mixing palette, you can see just how strong it actually is, and whether or not you want to use a lot or just a little bit to give that little bit of a tinge. Either way, this palette really does come off looking very professional because it's not the typical lemon shade, right? And the primrose is not your typical just, like quinacridone rose. It is very, very professional, and I like the effect it will give even to beginners on this palette. I think that all three of these palettes in this kit definitely have that more professional look when you paint with them, and it makes a huge difference when you use good brushes, when you use good paper, and when you use really good color. I also want to encourage you to practice stippling on this exercise so that you can get those little leaves in. You don't have to paint leaves individually. You can either kind of like spray your bristles a little bit, so that they kind of stick out, and just kind of dab them into the paper. Or you can just do areas that are a little more connected and then some that are disconnected so that you have kind of a splatter. You can even take a loose brush and just splatter. So there's a lot of different ways for you to get that effect. I'm just kind of playing a little bit with two different brushes and showing you some of them here. Now I'm going to take some of those darks and just kind of go in and etch in some details on the birch trees. They're already pretty much there for you, and it's hard to get them to look any different on this scale, so don't think you're having to go outside the box. I think the most thing you can do here is just kind of put the little bark marks in, and then maybe take a sharp edge and pull some extra stems off of the trunks, and that will give you everything you pretty much want in this kind of a sampling. Let's go on to the next one so you can see another way to do this exact same thing. On this second version, I'm going to be taking undiluted bits of golden pond. So just dipping my pointed round into this beautiful honey pot of color, and I'm just going to be gently stippling. Stippling gives you the ability to mix if you want to go over certain areas, but it also gives you the ability to have just bright, bold color. Then you can decide if there are points where you want to add some water and blend it more for a more blur kind of look, or if you want to leave the stippling in there as the detail. It's good for this scale, right, to do it. If you were working on a larger sheet of paper, then it becomes more like pointillism. But the stippling, I feel like on the smaller papers, it really works out well because you get a level of detail that is really random, because every time you hit the brush to the paper, it's going to be a little different. But you don't have to actually paint every leaf, but yet you get that feel, right, of that detail. But this is a really easy way to do it. I personally love it this way. I think it's really fun. And for this size of a painting, I think it works out so, so well. I also know that as I blend over, if I work quickly, I can actually mix on paper the orange and get as bold and bright as I want to without having to mix on the palette. That's an advantage here to moving quickly and also doing it the stippling. But again, if you feel more comfortable mixing the colors in your palette to come up with the different versions of orange all the way to the pink, then you can do you. Whatever it is that is easier for you and that you understand and you relate to, that's the road you should take. I'm just here to give you some guidance, get you started, and let you know that it is okay to paint any way you want to paint, because you are the artist, just like I'm doing it my way and showing you how I do it. But at the same time, I want to see everything that you've got. So if you have some ideas, if you're doing it, a variety of ways using different tools to achieve the effect, just explore, because you're going to find yourself within those moments. Having a guide is perfect, because having a guide kind of gets you started and it gets you from point A to point B. But that B to C is where you take my lessons, and then you just try different things, knowing that you have the confidence and the ability to go back to this technique and start over. But you might get some good ideas in this. It could be changing a brush, or mixing it on a palette, and having more control over maybe the mixes and where you put the colors. Or you could do a different shade of color entirely, But either way, this is a great way to start. As you can see, sometimes I'm randomly dipping the golden pond into some of the pink that I have on the paper, and then sometimes I'm picking it up off the palette. Sometimes I go right back into the honey pot. Keep in mind that when you go into the honey pot to dip your color, you're going to get the most solid, very, very heavy, high contrast version of it. That's going to be the, just the tone, big tone, all of that pigment. So you want to figure out how much is on your brush versus how much is going to hit your paper. And if you need to go to your palette first, just to kind of mix the brush onto the palette so you can control how much watercolor's there, that's a great way to do it. All right, so those are two ways. We're going to be painting a lot more things coming up. I have so many cool lessons for you guys to learn on this palette before we move on to the next one. I hope you're enjoying it. And if you want to sign up for the winter watercolor subscription, there might still be room. So go and check it out at jackswatercolor.com. Otherwise, you can also buy paint there, and the Jack's cotton is also being sold at this time. Have a great one, you guys, and thanks for being part. Don't forget to leave all your paintings into our Facebook group, because I am dying to see them.